The rain lashed the windows of that cramped Brooklyn walk-up like it was trying to break in, mirroring the storm raging inside me. I just shoved Jordan away, hard, my fist clenched around the collar of his shirt. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because his touch ignited something feral. Something I'd spent years starving into submission. "Stop," I gasped, my voice cracking like thunder. But even as the word left my lips, I knew it wasn't him I was fighting. It was the boy I'd been, the one who'd learned love came with fists and silence. Jordan didn't flinch. He just stood there in the dim glow of the single bulb swinging overhead, his hazel eyes steady as the Hudson on a calm day, chest rising and falling with the kind of patience that made my defenses feel like paper walls. Water dripped from his dark curls onto the scuffed hardwood floor. We'd been caught in the downpour rushing back from that hole-in-the-wall diner on Atlantic Avenue. We're over greasy eggs and black coffee. He'd finally asked the question I'd dodged for weeks. "What are you so afraid of?" "Alex." Now, here we were, soaked to the bone, the air thick with the scent of wet wool and unspoken confessions. I was 28, a graphic designer scraping by on freelance gigs that paid just enough to keep the lights on in this shoebox apartment stacked with sketch pads and half-finished logos. My days blurred into nights hunched over my MacBook. Pixels my only companions. Because people, real, breathing people, had a way of unraveling me. He stepped closer, not crowding, just enough to let me feel the heat radiating off him like a lifeline tossed into choppy waters. "Hey," he murmured, his voice low and rough from the cold. "Tell me if it's too much." Those words hung between us, simple as a breath, profound as a vow. And in that split second, as my pulse hammered in my ears louder than the storm outside, I realized I'd been waiting for them all my life, not just from him, but from anyone who'd ever dared to see me whole. It started 3 months earlier, on a sweltering July afternoon in Washington Square Park, where the air hummed with street musicians and the distant wail of sirens that never seemed to stop in this city. I was sketching under the shade of a gnarled oak, my pencil flying across the page as I captured the chaos, a drag queen twirling for tips, tourists snapping selfies, a cluster of queer kids laughing too loud to mask their nerves. New York had always been my escape hatch, from the Bible Belt chokehold of my upbringing in rural Georgia, where faggot was whispered like a curse and my father's belt left welts that faded slower than the shame. I'd fled at 18, armed with a partial scholarship to Pratt Institute and a duffel bag stuffed with dreams and denial. Art was my armor. It let me pour out the colors I couldn't name aloud. That's when Jordan appeared, like he'd stepped straight out of one of my fever dream illustrations, tall, broad-shouldered, with that effortless teacher vibe that screamed, "I grade on curves and believe in second chances." He was 32, fresh off a divorce that wasn't really a divorce because society didn't hand out those papers to men who'd loved men in secret. No, he'd been engaged to Sarah for appearances, a quiet architect who'd known the score and let him go with a hug and a "find your truth." Yordi. Now he taught English at a public high school in Queens, molding minds with Whitman and Baldwin, fighting the good fight against budget cuts and backward curricula. He dropped onto the bench beside me uninvited, his knee brushing mine in a way that sent sparks up my spine. "Mind if I critique?" he asked, nodding at my sketchbook. His grin was crooked, disarming, the kind that said he knew exactly how dangerous charm could be. I slammed the book shut, heat flooding my cheeks, not from the sun, but from the way his gaze lingered, seeing right through my faded band tee and ripped jeans to the quiver beneath. "Only if you buy me coffee first," I shot back, surprising myself with the flirt in my tone. It had been ages since I'd let words like that slip. Hookups in dimly lit bars were my norm. Quick and anonymous. Gone by dawn to avoid the morning after mirrors that reflected too much regret. He laughed, a sound like gravel under tires. Warm and unpolished. Deal. But fair warning, I'm a literature snob. If your doodles don't quote Keats, I'm out. We ended up at a cart on the park's edge. Steam rising from styrofoam cups as he rambled about how my lines echoed the raw vulnerability in Ginsberg's howl. I listened, mesmerized by the way his hands gestured, strong, callous from weekend hikes upstate. Veins mapping stories I wanted to trace. By the time the sun dipped low, painting the arch in fiery oranges, he'd coaxed out fragments of me, the freelance grind, the empty nights, scrolling grinder for distractions that never stuck. He shared, too, his classroom battles, the kid he'd outed accidentally last year and spent months protecting from fallout. Teaching queerness isn't in the lesson plan, he said, eyes distant, but it's in every page we turn. That coffee turned into dinners. Then stolen weekends wandering the High Line or crashing poetry slams in the village. Jordan was a slow burn, all lingering touches and loaded silences, never pushing when I pulled back. He'd text me lines from Auden at midnight. We must love one another or die, and I'd stare at my phone until the words blurred, wondering if this was what safety felt like. But safety was a lie I'd told myself before. Back home, my first crush had ended with a black eye from his buddies, courtesy of a rumor that spread faster than kazoo. Then college brought Tom, the charming activist who preached acceptance until the bedroom lights dimmed and his grip turned possessive, whispering, "You're mine," like a chain instead of a promise. I'd bolted after one too many bruises hidden under hoodies, vowing never to let anyone close enough to map my scars. With Jordan, though, it felt different, tentative, like learning to swim in a pool instead of the ocean. We'd cook pasta in his Astoria brownstone, his cat mister, whiskers weaving between our ankles, and he'd read aloud from dog-eared paperbacks while I sketched him unawares, the furrow in his brow when he pondered Foucault, the soft curve of his lips mouthing sonnets. One night, after a screening of Moonlight at an indie theater in Bushwick, we walked home in the kind of quiet that begged for truths. The streets were alive with laughter spilling from bars, rainbow flags fluttering like defiant hearts. "You ever think about it?" he asked, his shoulder bumping mine. "Us." More than this, my stomach twisted, a familiar knot of fear and want. More how? He stopped under a street lamp, the light haloing his face like some urban saint. "Dating. For real. No half measures." I wanted to say yes, to dive in head first, but the ghost clawed at me, the what-ifs of exposure, the fallout I'd seen swallow friends whole. Instead, I deflected with a joke about his terrible taste in rom-coms. He let it slide, but I saw the flicker of hurt in his eyes, and it haunted me for days. The turning point came in September, when autumn painted the city in rust and gold. I'd landed a big client, a nonprofit pushing for marriage equality, and the deadline crunch had me pulling all-nighters, fueled by Red Bull and resentment at my own isolation. Jordan showed up at my door one Thursday evening, takeout bags in hand, his tie loosened like an invitation. "You look like hell," he said, but his tone was gentle, not judging. We ate cross-legged on my futon, the TV murmuring some forgettable sitcom, but neither of us watched. His knee pressed against mine, a steady pressure that built like a wave. when his hand found my thigh. Tentative. I didn't pull away. Heat bloomed low in my belly, chasing away the chill of exhaustion. He leaned in, breath warm against my neck, lips brushing the shell of my ear. "Tell me if it's too much," he whispered again. Those words a balm on old wounds. I turned, capturing his mouth in a kiss that started soft, exploratory, then deepened into something desperate. Hands roamed as under my shirt, tracing the ridges of my ribs like he was memorizing a poem, mine fisting his hair, pulling him closer until there was no space left for doubt. We tumbled to the floor, clothes shedding like old skin, his body solid and yielding under me, every gasp and moan a revelation. For the first time, touch didn't feel like a trap. It felt like coming home. But dawn brought the crash. I woke to his arm draped over my waist, sunlight slanting through the blinds, and panic surged like bile. What if this was just another mistake? What if he saw the cracks, the panic attacks that hit without warning? The way I'd flinch at raised voices? I slipped out, leaving a note. Work emergency. Talk later. Cowardice. Pure and sharp. He didn't text back right away, and the silence stretched into 2 days of radio static in my head. My designs turned jagged, all thorns and shadows, the client emailing worried questions I ignored. By Saturday, guilt gnawed at me raw, so I showed up at his school during open house, blending into the crowd of parents and kids like a ghost. I found him in the auditorium, mid-reading from the house on Mango Street, his voice weaving magic for a room full of wide-eyed teens. He spotted me in the back row, paused just a beat, then continued, but his eyes held mine like an anchor. Afterward, in the emptying hallway lined with lockers plastered in protest posters, he cornered me gently. Running scared, no anger, just that steady gaze that undid me. I swallowed hard, words tumbling out in a rush, the exes who'd weaponized affection, the family letters I'd burned unopened, the fear that love for someone like me always ended in ruins. I don't know how to do this without breaking, I admitted, voice barely audible over the distant chatter. Jordan pulled me into an empty classroom, door clicking shut behind us. Posters of Shakespeare and Steinbeck stared down like benevolent witnesses. He cupped my face, thumbs brushing my cheekbones. Then we learned together. Slow. Your pace. But Alex, I'm in this. All the way, we kissed there, amid desks scarred with initials and dreams. A promise sealed in the fluorescent hum. From then on, it was us against the undertow, movie nights that bled into mornings, hikes in the Palisades where he'd point out constellations and I'd sketch them into forever. He met my ragtag artist friends at a loft party in Williamsburg, charming them with stories of his students' zine projects on queer history. I tagged along to his faculty holiday bash, enduring awkward small talk, but basking in the way he introduced me. My partner, Alex, the one who makes the world prettier, one design at a time. Yet tension simmered beneath the surface, a fault line waiting to crack. Jordan's ex, Sarah, reappeared in November, not as a rival, but a bridge, inviting us to her firm's gala for LGBTQ plus rights. A glittering affair in a Soho loft with donors in tuxes and activists in protest pins. I felt like an imposter in my borrowed blazer. Jordan's hand at the small of my back, the only thing grounding me amid the champagne flutes and air kisses. That's where I met Daniel, a silver-tongued lobbyist with eyes like polished knives. He cornered Jordan by the bar. All old college buddy charm, masking sharper intent. "Heard you're off the market," Daniel purred, glancing at me like I was a curiosity. "Cute. But really, Yordi, trading stability for." "This," Jordan stiffened. But before he could retort, Daniel leaned in, voice oily. "Your principal's already whispering. Small town in a big city. Remember? One wrong move. And that 10-year dream? Poof." The threat landed like a sucker punch, and I saw the color drain from Jordan's face. We left early, the cab ride home silent except for the city's relentless pulse. In his apartment, he paced like a caged wolf, fists clenched. "It's bullshit," he growled. "But he's right. The board's conservative. If they sniff out what?" I snapped, fear twisting into anger. "That you love a man? That you're happy?" He stopped, deflating, and pulled me close. "That I could lose everything, including you, if it blows back." We made love that night, fierce and reclaiming, bodies slick with sweat and defiance. But the seed of doubt had taken root. December brought snow and sabotage, anonymous emails to Jordan's inbox, forwarded from Daniel's network, hinting at inappropriate conduct with vague allusions to me. His principal called a meeting, all concerned frowns and HR forms. And Jordan came home shaken. "I ask you." I told him it's lies, he said, sinking onto the couch. "But Alex, what if it's not worth it? What if I drag you down?" The words cut deeper than any blade. I thought of my own ghosts, my mother's last voicemail, slurred with bourbon, begging me to come home and pray this away. I deleted it, but it echoed now, a dirge for what we'd built. "Don't," I whispered, kneeling before him, hands on his knees. "We're worth fighting for." But the fight escalated. Valentine's Day dawned brittle, the city blanketed in ice that mirrored my resolve. Jordan had planned a weekend getaway to a cabin in the Catskills, promising fireside talks and no-cell service to drown out the noise. We drove up in his battered Subaru, radio crooning Springsteen, hands linked over the gear shift. The cabin was rustic perfection, log walls, a stone hearth, the woods whispering secrets through frost-laced pines. That first night, as flames crackled and wine warmed our veins, he knelt by the rug, a small box in his palm, not a ring, but a keychain etched with coordinates to Washington Square. To the spot where it started, he said, voice thick, "Build with me." Tears stung my eyes, and I nodded, pulling him down into a tangle of limbs and laughter. We explored each other anew, slow and reverent, his murmurs of "I love you" syncing with my heartbeat. For those stolen hours, the world shrank to us, two men rewriting their stories in the glow of embers. Reality intruded Sunday morning, a phone buzzing like a hornet. Jordan's principal, emergency meeting tomorrow. Rumors had swelled into an investigation. Daniel's fingerprints all over the leak. We raced back, the highway a blur of dread. In the apartment, I paced while he drafted responses, his face etched with exhaustion. "This ends now," I declared, grabbing my coat. We confront him, Jordan protested, but I was already out the door, subway rattling me to Daniel's midtown high-rise. The lobby gleamed sterile, security eyeing my disheveled state. I bluffed my way up, adrenaline my passport, and pounded on his door until it cracked open. Daniel smirked, glass of scotch in hand, shirt unbuttoned like a taunt. The boyfriend. How quaint. Back off, Jordan, I snarled, stepping inside despite the warning bells. Or I go public. Every email, every threat. His laugh was venom. Public? Darling, that's your funeral. You think the world's ready for a sob story from some Georgia refugee playing house with a teacher on thin ice? He lunged in, not with fists, but words, shoving me against the wall with a forearm to my throat, breath hot and bourbon-soured. He'll choose his career over you. They always do. Stars burst behind my eyes, old instincts screaming to fight or flee. I need him hard, breaking free, and bolted down the hall, stairs blurring, out into the biting wind. My hands shook as I dialed Jordan, collapsing on a bench in Bryant Park, snowflakes melting on my lashes. He was there in minutes, wrapping me in his coat, hailing a cab. In the back seat, I spilled it all, the shove, the slur, the terror that clawed my gut. Jordan's jaw tightened, but his hold was steady. We'll report it. Together. Monday's meeting was a battlefield. HR drones. The principal's pinched face. Daniel's absence a glaring hole. Jordan laid it out calm and ironclad. Emails printed. Witnesses from a gala. I stood beside him, voice steady as I recounted the assault. My bruises blooming purple under my sleeve a silent exhibit. The room shifted, murmurs turned to nods. The principal's frown deepening into resolve. You're protected, she said finally, glancing at Jordan. Both of you. And Daniel? He's done here. Relief crashed over us like a wave. But it was laced with aftershocks. That night, in the quiet of my apartment, Jordan traced the marks on my neck with feather-light fingers. You didn't have to do that, he whispered. Yes, I did. I met his gaze, the vulnerability raw between us. Because loving you means fighting dirty sometimes. But it's worth every scar. Spring unfurled tentative. Cherry blossoms defiant against the gray. The investigation wrapped with Daniel's resignation, whispers of lawsuits nipping at his heels, and Jordan's tenure secured. A quiet victory celebrated with rooftop beers and my friends' raucous toasts. We moved in together that May, his brownstone becoming ours, my drafting table by the window, his bookshelves groaning under our shared stories. Yet the real bloom came in subtler ways, the way he'd pause mid-lesson prep to kiss my temple, or how I designed flyers for his Students' Pride assembly, infusing them with colors that screamed joy. We volunteered at the center in Chelsea, mentoring kids like the boy I'd been, teaching them that love wasn't a battlefield, but a canvas. One June evening, as twilight bled pink over the East River, we stood on the Brooklyn Bridge, arms linked, the city a glittering testament below. Tell me if it's too much, Jordan teased, echoing that rainy night. His ring, simple platinum, exchanged in a civil ceremony last month, catching the last light. I leaned into him, the weight of years lifting like fog. Never too much. It's everything, in the end. It wasn't perfection we found, but grace, the kind forged in storms, tender in sunlight. We'd waited lifetimes for these words. This man, this life. And damn if it wasn't worth every heartbeat.